Commander Jake Harrison sat at his desk in the Earth Defense Force headquarters, staring at the strange signal that had just arrived on his computer screen. The transmission was coming from deep space, far beyond the outer planets of the solar system. It was encrypted with codes that only a few alien species knew how to use. Jake had been working with alien contacts for 15 years, but this signal felt different. There was something urgent about it, something that made his stomach feel tight with worry. He pressed a button on his desk and called for Captain Lisa Martinez, the best alien language expert on Earth. Lisa arrived within minutes, her brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. She had been studying alien languages since she was a teenager, and her skills had saved human lives many times before. Jake showed her the signal on his screen. "What do you think, Lisa?" "This came from the Kepler 442 system," Jake said, pointing. At the flashing lights on his monitor, Lisa leaned forward and studied the patterns. Her eyes grew wide as she began to understand what she was seeing. "This is from the Zalthari Confederation, Jake, but something is very wrong. The signal is using their highest emergency codes. The Zalthari were one of the few alien species that humans had good relations with. They were peaceful creatures who looked like giant praying mantises, but they were kind and intelligent. Their ambassador, Veltar, had visited Earth many times and had become a friend to many humans." Lisa worked quickly to decode the message. As more words appeared on the screen, both Jake and Lisa felt their hearts sink. The message was a desperate cry for help from Ambassador Veltar himself. "Commander Harrison," the translated message began, "I am sending this message with great fear in my heart. Our peaceful confederation is facing complete destruction. A terrible enemy called the Kreks Empire has been moving through our part of the galaxy, destroying everything in their path." Jake and Lisa continued reading. The message explained that the Kreks were not like other alien species. They were a hive mind, meaning they all shared one collective consciousness. They had no mercy, no feelings of compassion, and no interest in peace. Their only goal was to conquer and enslave other species. "The Kreks have already destroyed 12 different civilizations," the message continued. "They take prisoners and force them to work in horrible conditions. They use captured beings for medical experiments. They strip entire planets of all their resources and leave nothing but dead worlds behind." Lisa's hands were shaking as she read the next part. "The Kreks fleet is huge, Jake. Veltar says they have thousands of ships heading towards Zalthari space. The Zalthari military is small because they are a peaceful people. They cannot fight against this enemy." Jake stood up and walked to the window. Outside, he could see the busy streets of New Geneva, where humans went about their daily lives without knowing that their alien friends were in terrible danger. Children played in parks, families walked together, and everyone felt safe. The Zalthari had helped make this peace possible by sharing their technology and knowledge with humanity. "There's more," Lisa said quietly. "Veltar says the Kreks will reach Zalthari space in less than 3 weeks. After they destroy the Zalthari worlds, they plan to continue expanding toward Earth. They see humans as their next target." Jake felt anger rising in his chest. The Zalthari had been good friends to humanity. They had shared their advanced energy technology, helped cure diseases, and even taught human children about the wonders of the universe. Now they were about to be wiped out by monsters who cared nothing for life. "What else does the message say?" Jake asked. Lisa scrolled down to read the final part. "Veltar is formally asking for military help from Earth. He says the Zalthari will share all their remaining technology with us if we can help protect them. But Jake, he also says he knows. He is asking for something that might be impossible. The Kreks fleet is just too big." Jake immediately called President Andrew Collins. Within an hour, Lisa and Jake were sitting in the Oval Office, explaining the situation to the most powerful man on Earth. President Collins was a calm man who usually thought carefully before making decisions, but today his face showed deep concern. "How many ships do the Kreks have?" President Collins asked. "According to Veltar, the advanced fleet has about 2,000 ships," Lisa replied. "But there are reports of a main fleet that is even larger coming behind them." The president stood up and walked to a map of the galaxy that hung on his wall. The Zelthari system is only 47 light-years from Earth. If the Kreks defeat them, we would be next on their list. Jake nodded. Yes, sir, but there's something else. The Zelthari have been our friends for 20 years. They helped us develop clean energy, cure cancer, and explore space. We cannot just let them die. President Collins was quiet for a long moment. Then he picked up his phone and called General Patricia Stone, the head of all Earth's military forces. General Stone, I need you here immediately. We have a situation that requires our attention. While they waited for the general, Lisa continued translating more parts of the Zelthari message. She found detailed reports about Krek's weapons, their tactics, and the horrible things they did to captured populations. The more she read, the more horrified she became. Jake, look at this, she said, showing him a section about a planet called Zarian. The Kreks took every living being on this planet and forced them to work in mines until they died. When the population was too weak to work, they just left them to starve. General Stone arrived 30 minutes later. She was a tough woman who had fought in many battles and never backed down from a fight. When she heard about the Zelthari situation, her face became hard as stone. How long do we have to prepare? She asked. 2.5 weeks before the Kreks reach Zelthari space, Jake replied. General Stone looked at the president. Sir, if we are going to help them, we need to start moving ships immediately. But I have to be honest with you. This will not be a small peacekeeping mission. The Kreks sound like they will only understand one thing. What's that? President Collins asked. Total war, General Stone replied. If we go to help the Zelthari, we need to go with everything we have. We cannot just chase the Kreks away. They will come back. We need to destroy their ability to threaten anyone ever again. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Humanity had fought wars before, but never against an alien species that wanted to enslave the entire galaxy. This would be the biggest military operation in human history. President Collins looked at each person in the room. The Zelthari are our friends. They have helped us become a better species. If we do not help them, we will lose our souls. And, if we let the Kreks destroy them, we will be next. He turned to General Stone. Begin preparing our fleets. We are going to help the Zelthari, and we are going to make sure the Kreks never threaten anyone again. As the meeting ended, Jake thought about Veltar's message. The Zelthari had asked for help, expecting maybe a few ships or some weapons. They had no idea that humanity was about to respond with the full power of Earth's military. The Kreks had made a terrible mistake. They had threatened humanity's friends, and now they were going to learn what happened when humans decided to go to war. General Patricia Stone stood in the command center of the United Earth Military Headquarters, watching hundreds of screens showing ships from all over the solar system. In just 5 days, humanity had begun moving the largest fleet in their history. Ships that had been in storage were being pulled out and prepared for battle. Crews that had been on leave were called back to duty. Factories that made weapons were working day and night. The general looked at the numbers on her main screen. Already, 300 ships were ready to fight. Another 400 would be ready within a week. This was more ships than Earth had ever sent to fight anywhere, but Patricia knew it might not be enough. Lieutenant Colonel Ryan Carter walked up to her desk. He was a tall man with short black hair and scars on his face from an accident years ago. Ryan was one of the best military pilots in the Earth Defense Force, and Patricia trusted him with the most dangerous missions. General, the advance team is ready to go, Ryan said. We have 10 of our fastest ships loaded with the best equipment. We can reach Zelthari space in 12 days if we push the engines hard, Patricia nodded. Your job is to get there before the main fleet and learn everything you can about the Kreks. We need to know how they fight, what weapons they use, and how we can beat them. But Ryan, be careful. Do not let them capture you alive. Ryan understood what she meant. If the Kreks captured humans, they would torture them for information about Earth's defenses. Do not worry, General. My team knows the risks. Across the Base, Dr. Emma Rodriguez was working in a special laboratory with a team of scientists. They had been given pieces of Zelthari technology that had been shared with Earth years ago. Now they were trying to combine it with human weapons to create something new and powerful. Emma was a short woman with curly hair, who had been studying alien technology for 10 years. She was known for being able to solve problems that other scientists could not figure out. Today, she was working on something that could change the war. "Look at this," Emma said to her assistant, Dr. Paul Kim. She showed him a small device that was glowing with blue light. The Zelthari energy system can make our weapons 3 times more powerful. But that is not the best part. Paul leaned closer to see. "What else can it do?" Emma smiled. "It can make our ship's shields stronger too? The Krek's weapons might not be able to hurt us as much as they think." While Emma worked on weapons, other scientists were studying the information that Veltar had sent about the Kreks. They learned that the Kreks were different from any enemy humans had ever fought. They did not feel fear or pain the way humans did. They followed orders without question. They never retreated from a fight, but the scientists also found something important. The Kreks had one weakness. Because they shared a hive mind, they all depended on communication signals between their ships. If those signals were damaged, the Kreks would become confused and unable to work together. Ryan Carter's advance team left Earth on a cold morning. His flagship was called the HMS Vengeance, a fast attack ship with the newest weapons and shields. With him were 9 other ships, each carrying the best soldiers and equipment that Earth could provide. As they traveled through space toward the Zelthari system, Ryan studied everything they knew about the Kreks. The reports were disturbing. On every planet they conquered, the Kreks had done terrible things. They had enslaved entire populations, destroyed cities, and conducted medical experiments on living beings. "Captain Carter," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Amy Johnson, "we are receiving a signal from the Zelthari. Ambassador Veltar wants to speak with you." Ryan nodded. "Put him on the screen." The image of Veltar appeared on the main screen. The alien looked tired and scared. His large eyes showed the stress of knowing his people were about to be destroyed. "Captain Carter," Veltar said, "I am so grateful that humanity has decided to help us, but I must warn you. The Kreks are closer than we thought. They will arrive in our system in just 8 days. Ryan felt his heart beat faster. "Ambassador, we will be there in 4 days. Can your people hold out until then?" Veltar's alien face tried to show hope. "We will try, Captain. We have been preparing our few weapons and hiding our civilians. But if the Kreks come before your main fleet arrives, I fear we will not survive." After the call ended, Ryan ordered his ships to go even faster. They pushed their engines to the limit, racing through space to reach their friends before it was too late. Back on Earth, General Stone was dealing with a new problem. The other nations of the world were asking questions about the massive military operation. Some countries wanted to send their own ships to help. Others were worried that fighting the Kreks might bring the war to Earth. President Collins called a meeting with the leaders of every major nation. In the United Nations building, he stood before representatives from around the world and explained the situation. "The Kreks are not just a threat to the Zelthari," President Collins said. "They are a threat to every living being in this part of the galaxy. If we do not stop them now, they will come for us next, and when they do, there will be no one left to help us." The President of Russia, Vladimir Petrov, stood up. "America, you are asking us to trust you with the safety of our entire species. How do we know this is not just a trick to increase your military power?" President Collins looked directly at him. "Because, President Petrov, I am not asking you to trust America. I am asking you to trust humanity. This is not about one country. This is about our survival as a species." The debate continued for hours, but in the end, every nation agreed to support the mission. Ships from Britain, Japan, Germany, and dozens of other countries began joining the Earth fleet. Humanity was truly united for the first time in its history. Meanwhile, Ryan Carter and his advance team were getting close to Zelthari space. They had been traveling for 3 days when their sensors detected something that made everyone on the bridge freeze with fear. "Captain," said the sensor officer, "I am picking up a massive energy signature ahead of us. It looks like a fleet of ships." Ryan stared at the screen. "How many ships?" "Sir, I count at least 500 ships. They are heading directly toward the Zelthari system." Ryan realized they had found the Krek's advance fleet. These were the enemy ships that would destroy his friends if he could not stop them. But his small force of 10 ships was no match for 500 enemy vessels. "Captain, what are your orders?" asked Lieutenant Johnson. Ryan thought quickly. He could turn around and go back to Earth, but that would mean abandoning the Zelthari. He could try to fight, but his ships would be destroyed in minutes. Or he could try something very dangerous. "We are going to get closer," Ryan said. "We need to learn everything we can about these ships. The main fleet needs to know what they are facing." As the human ships moved closer to the Krek's fleet, they used their best stealth technology to avoid being seen. Ryan watched the alien ships on his screen. They were large and dark, with strange shapes that looked like they were designed for war. "Captain," whispered the communications officer, "the Krek ships are sending signals to each other." "Should I try to record them?" "Yes," Ryan replied, "record everything. Those signals might be important." But as they got closer, something went wrong. One of the Krek ships suddenly turned toward them. The aliens had detected the human vessels despite their stealth technology. "Captain, we have been spotted," said the weapons officer. "The Kreks are targeting us." Ryan knew they had no choice. "Now, all ships, prepare for battle. We cannot let them reach the Zelthari without a fight." The first shots were fired, and the war between humanity and the Kreks had begun. The space around the Zelthari moon of Kethra erupted in flashes of light as laser beams and missiles flew between the human and Krek ships. Ryan Carter gripped the arms of his command chair as the HMS Vengeance shook from enemy fire. His small fleet of 10 ships was fighting against 500 Krek's vessels, but they were not giving up. "Captain, our shields are down to 60%, called out Lieutenant Johnson from her station. "The Krek's weapons are stronger than we expected." Ryan looked at the tactical display. His ships were fast and well-armed, but the Kreks had too many vessels. Every time his ships destroyed one enemy ship, 3 more took its place. But Ryan had learned something important in the first few minutes of battle. "Johnson, did you notice how the Krek's ships move?" Ryan asked while dodging another missile. "Yes, sir. They all move together like they are dancing. They never break formation." Ryan nodded. "That is because they share one mind. They cannot think as individuals like we can." "Send a message to all our ships? Tell them to use random attack patterns? Make it impossible for the Kreks to predict what we will do next." The human ships began moving in ways that confused the Kreks. Sometimes they would attack from above, sometimes from below. Sometimes they would retreat, then suddenly turn around and attack again. The Kreks, who were used to fighting enemies that followed predictable patterns, began making mistakes. Captain Amy Johnson, who commanded the destroyer HMS Retribution, saw an opportunity. A large Krek's command ship was separated from the main fleet, trying to coordinate the battle. Amy knew that if she could capture that ship, she might learn valuable information about the enemy. "All crew, prepare for boarding action," Amy announced over the ship's communication system. "We are going to take that command ship." Amy's crew was made up of Marines who had trained for years to fight in space. They put on their armor and grabbed their weapons, ready to board an alien ship and fight hand-to-hand with creatures they had never seen before. The HMS Retribution moved quickly toward the Krek's command ship. Amy ordered her gunners to target the alien ship's engines and weapons, but not to destroy it completely. She needed that ship intact so her Marines could board it. "Target their docking bay," Amy ordered. "We are going in hard and fast." The human destroyer smashed into the side of the Krek ship. Metal screamed as the 2 vessels locked together. Amy's Marines, led by Sergeant Tony Martinez, rushed through the opening into the alien ship. Tony was a tough man from Texas who had fought in many battles on Earth, but nothing had prepared him for what he saw inside the Krex ship. The corridors were dark and cold, with a strange smell that made his stomach feel sick. The walls were covered in a black substance that looked like it was alive. "Stay together," Tony told his Marines. "Watch for movement in every direction." The Marines moved through the alien ship carefully. They had studied pictures of Krex soldiers, but seeing them in person was different. The Krex were tall, thin creatures with gray skin and large black eyes. They moved quickly and seemed to feel no fear, even when facing human weapons. The first group of Krex soldiers attacked without warning. They came from the ceiling, the walls, and the floor at the same time. Tony's Marines fired their weapons, but the Krex kept coming even after being shot multiple times. "These things do not know when to quit," shouted Marine Lisa Rodriguez as she fought off 2 Krex soldiers with her combat knife. Tony realized that the Krex were different from any enemy humans had ever fought. They did not feel pain away. Humans did. They did not retreat when they were losing. They fought until they were completely destroyed, but the humans had something the Krex did not expect. Human soldiers could think for themselves. They could adapt to new situations quickly. They could work together without needing orders from a central mind. "Rodriguez, take your team to the left," Tony ordered. "Williams, go right. I will go straight. Ahead, we will surround them." The Marines split up and attacked the Krex from 3 directions. The aliens, who were used to fighting enemies that moved in predictable patterns, could not handle the human tactics. Within minutes, Tony's team had cleared the corridor and was moving toward the command center. When they reached the bridge of the Krex ship, Tony saw something that made his blood run cold. The command center was filled with screens showing other battles happening across the galaxy. The Krex were not just fighting the Zelthari. They were attacking dozens of other species at the same time. "Sergeant Martinez," called Marine Danny Williams from across the room, "you need to see this." Tony walked over to where Williams was standing. On the screen in front of them were images of planets that had been completely destroyed. Cities were burning. Millions of beings were being marched into slave camps. Children were being separated from their parents. "My God," whispered Tony, "they are monsters." The Marines quickly downloaded all the information from the Krex computers. They learned about the locations of Krex bases, their weapons, and their plans for future attacks. But they also learned something that made Tony's heart sink. The fleet they were fighting was just the advance force. The main Krex armada was 3 times larger, and was already on its way to finish what the advance fleet had started. Meanwhile, back in space, Ryan Carter was fighting for his life. His small fleet had destroyed 30 Krex ships, but they had lost 4 of their own vessels. The remaining 6 human ships were damaged and running low on ammunition. "Captain, we cannot hold out much longer," reported the weapons officer. "We need to retreat." Ryan looked at the tactical display. The Krex ships were closing in from all sides. In a few minutes, his remaining ships would be destroyed. But he also knew that if he retreated, the Krex would continue toward the Zelthari. "Homeworld, Johnson, send a message to Earth," Ryan ordered. "Tell them what we learned about the Krex. Tell them they need to send everything they have." As Ryan prepared to make his final stand, something unexpected happened. The space around Kethra began to glow with bright blue light. The Zelthari had arrived with their own fleet. Ambassador Veltar S. voice came over the radio. "Captain Carter, we could not let you fight alone. The Zelthari may be a peaceful people, but we will not stand by while our friends die protecting." U.S. The Zelthari ships were different from both human and Krex vessels. They were white and smooth, and they moved through space like they were swimming through water. Instead of missiles and lasers, they used energy weapons that could bend space itself. "Veltar, your people are not warriors," Ryan said. "You do not have to do this." "Captain Carter," Veltar replied, "you came across the galaxy to help us. You are fighting against impossible odds to save people you barely know. How can we do?" "Less?" The Zelthari ships attacked the Krex fleet with weapons that the aliens had never seen before. The energy beams could pass through Krex shields and disable their ships without destroying them. For the first time in the battle, the Kreks began to retreat, but Ryan knew this victory was temporary. Tony Martinez and his Marines had just returned from the captured Krek ship with terrible news. The information they had gathered showed that the main Kreks fleet was already close to Zalthari space. "Captain," Tony reported, "the Kreks have been planning this attack for months. They have studied our defenses and know exactly how to beat us. And sir, they have weapons we have never seen before." Ryan looked at the data that Tony had brought back. The main Kreks fleet had ships that were twice as large as anything humans had ever built. They had weapons that could destroy entire planets. And they had something else that made Ryan's blood run cold. The Kreks had been experimenting on captured humans from other colonies. They had learned about human biology and had created weapons specifically designed to kill humans quickly and painfully. "Johnson, get me a direct line to Admiral Brooks," Ryan ordered. "He needs to know what we are facing." As the message traveled back to Earth, Ryan looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the largest fleet in human history was racing towards Zalthari space. But even with all their ships and weapons, Ryan wondered if it would be enough. The Kreks were not just another enemy. They were a force of pure destruction that wanted to enslave or destroy every living being in the galaxy. And now they knew that humans were coming to stop them. The real war was about to begin. Admiral Kevin Brooks stood on the bridge of the flagship UES Defiant, watching the largest fleet in human history move through space toward the Zalthari system. Around him, 800 human ships from every nation on Earth traveled together, in perfect formation. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. "Admiral, we are receiving the latest intelligence from Captain Carter's team," reported the communications officer. "The news is not good." Brooks had been expecting this. The reports from the advance team had been getting worse each day. First, they learned that the Kreks were more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Then they discovered that the main Kreks fleet was much larger than expected. Now there was something else. "Put the report on the main screen," Brooks ordered. The information that appeared made everyone on the bridge feel sick. Dr. Rachel Kim, the fleet's chief scientist, had been studying the captured Kreks data for 3 days. What she found changed everything about how they would fight this war. "Admiral," Dr. Kim said over the video link, "the Kreks have a weakness, but it is not what we expected. Their hive mind communication system can be disrupted, but only from very close range. Someone would have to get inside their main command ship and plant a device directly into their central computer." Brooks understood what this meant. That would be a suicide mission. The main command ship will be in the center of their fleet, protected by hundreds of other ships. "Yes, sir," Dr. Kim replied. "But if we can disrupt their communication system, their entire fleet will become confused. They will start attacking each other instead of us. It might be our only chance to win." Brooks looked at his tactical display. The Kreks' main fleet was just 2 days away from the Zalthari system. His own fleet was still 3 days away. Even if everything went perfectly, they would arrive after the Kreks had already begun their attack. "Dr. Kim, how long do you need to prepare this disruption device?" Brooks asked. "I can have it ready in 18 hours, sir. But we need to find someone willing to carry it into the heart of the enemy fleet." Brooks knew that many of his officers would volunteer for such a mission. Human soldiers had always been willing to sacrifice themselves to save others. But this was different. This was asking someone to die so that others could live. Colonel Steve Adams was in his quarters when he heard about the mission. Steve was a Special Forces officer who had trained for the most dangerous assignments. He had been in the military for 20 years and had never backed down from a fight. When Steve heard that volunteers were needed for the suicide mission, he did not hesitate. He went directly to Admiral Brooks and requested to lead the team. "Colonel Adams, you understand what this mission means?" Brooks said. "There is no chance of survival. You will be flying directly into the center of the enemy fleet." Steve nodded. "I understand, sir. But if we do not try, the Kreks will destroy the Zalthari and then come for Earth. My daughter lives on Earth, Admiral. I will not let those monsters hurt her." Brooks felt a heavy weight in his chest. Steve Adams was a good man with a family waiting for him at home. But the mission was necessary, and Steve was the best person to lead it. "How many people do you need?" Brooks asked. "Give me 12 Marines, sir. We will take a fast assault ship and get to the Krex fleet before they reach the Zelthari system. If we can disrupt their communications during the battle, it will give our fleet the advantage we need." While Steve prepared for his mission, the rest of the human fleet continued, racing toward the Zelthari system. Captain Helen Thompson, who commanded the battleship UES Thunderbolt, was studying the latest reports about Krex tactics. Helen had been fighting in space for 15 years, but she had never faced an enemy like this. The Krex did not retreat. When they were losing, they did not negotiate or surrender. They fought until every last ship was destroyed. "Captain Thompson," called her weapons officer, "we are receiving a transmission from the Zelthari system." "It is Ambassador Veltar." Helen had met Veltar several times during diplomatic meetings. He was a kind and intelligent being who had always been friendly to humans. Now his voice sounded tired and scared. "Captain Thompson, the Krex have arrived at the edge of our system," Veltar said. "We estimate they have over 2,000 ships. Our combined fleet with Captain Carter's ships is holding them back, but we cannot last much longer." Helen looked at her tactical display. Her fleet was still 2 days away from the Zelthari system. "Ambassador, we are coming as fast as we can. Hold on just a little longer." "Captain, there is something else," Veltar continued. "The Krex have sent us a message. They say they will spare our civilian population if we surrender immediately. They want us to become their slaves instead of fighting." Helen felt anger rising in her chest. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that the Zelthari would rather die free than live as slaves." "But Captain, I am not sure we can keep fighting." "They have weapons that can destroy our largest ships with one shot." After the transmission ended, Helen called a meeting with her senior officers. They needed to find a way to help their friends, but the Krex fleet was too large and too powerful for a direct attack. "What if we do not fight them directly?" suggested her tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Jack Wilson. "What if we attack their supply lines instead?" Helen considered this idea. The Krex fleet was huge, but it would need supplies and fuel to keep fighting. If they could destroy the Krex supply ships, the main fleet would become weaker. "Wilson, find their supply ships and plan an attack," Helen ordered. "We will hit them where they do not expect it." Meanwhile, Colonel Steve Adams and his team were preparing for their suicide mission. They had loaded Dr. Kim's disruption device onto a fast assault ship called the UES Striker. The ship was small and fast, designed to get past enemy defenses. Quickly, Steve looked at his team of 12 Marines. They were all volunteers who knew they would not survive the mission. But they also knew that their sacrifice might save millions of lives. "Remember, our job is to get this device to the Krex command ship," Steve told his team. "Once we plant it in their central computer, their entire fleet will become confused. That is when our main fleet can attack and win." Marine Sarah Johnson, who had served with Steve for 5 years, raised her hand. "Colonel, what happens to us after we plant the device?" Steve looked at each member of his team. "The device will destroy the command ship when it activates. We will not survive. But our families will be safe and the Zelthari will live." The team nodded. They had all accepted their fate. They were going to die so that others could live. It was the most human thing they could do. As the UES Striker launched from the main fleet, Steve thought about his daughter back on Earth. She was only 8 years old, and she would grow up without a father. But she would grow up free in a world where the Krex could not hurt her. The small ship accelerated toward the Krex fleet, using its stealth systems to avoid detection. Steve knew that once they got close to the enemy, the stealth would not work anymore. They would have to fight their way through hundreds of enemy ships to reach their target. "Colonel, we are approaching the edge of the Krex fleet," reported the pilot. "I can see their command ship in the center. It is huge, sir. Much larger than anything we have ever seen." Steve looked at the tactical display. The Krex command ship was the size of a small city. It was surrounded by rings of smaller ships. all protecting it from attack. Getting to it would be almost impossible. "All right, team," Steve said over the ship's communication system. "This is it. We are going to punch through their defenses and plant this device. No matter what happens, we do not stop until the mission is complete." The UE Striker dropped its stealth systems and began its final approach to the Krex command ship. Immediately, alarms began sounding throughout the enemy fleet. Hundreds of Krex ships turned toward the small human vessel and began firing. Steve watched as laser beams and missiles flew past his ship. Some of them hit, shaking the vessel and damaging its systems. But the pilot kept flying toward the target, dodging and weaving through the enemy fire. "We are almost there, Colonel," the pilot shouted over the noise of battle. "Prepare for boarding." Steve and his Marines grabbed their weapons and put on their armor. In a few minutes, they would be fighting for their lives inside an alien ship. But they were ready. They had trained for this moment, and they would not fail. The war was about to reach its turning point. The UES Striker crashed through the hull of the massive Krex command ship with a sound like thunder. Colonel Steve Adams and his 12 Marines were thrown against the walls as their small ship tore a hole in the alien vessel. Alarms screamed throughout both ships as emergency systems activated. "Everyone alive?" Steve shouted as he pulled himself to his feet. His head was bleeding from the impact, but he could still fight. "All here, Colonel," replied Marine Sarah Johnson. She checked her weapon and looked at the hole their ship had made in the alien hull. Beyond it was darkness and the strange smell of the Krex ship. Steve grabbed the disruption device that Dr. Kim had built. It was about the size of a backpack and glowed with blue light. This small machine would either save millions of lives or die with them in the next few minutes. "Remember the plan," Steve told his team. "We need to get to the central computer core. Johnson, take 4 Marines and go left. Williams, take 4 and go right. I will take the rest straight ahead. We meet." At the core, the Marines split up and entered the alien ship. The corridors were even stranger than the ones they had seen before. The walls seemed to pulse like they were alive, and the floor was covered with a black substance that made walking difficult. Steve and his 3 Marines moved quickly through the ship. They could hear the sounds of Krex soldiers coming from every direction. The aliens knew humans were aboard their command ship, and they were moving to stop them. The first group of Krex soldiers appeared around a corner ahead of them. Steve did not hesitate. He fired his weapon and charged forward, his Marines right behind him. The Krex soldiers were tall and fast, but they could not match human determination. "Keep moving," Steve shouted as they fought through the aliens. "Do not stop for anything." Meanwhile, in space around the command ship, the largest battle in human history was beginning. Admiral Brooks had arrived with the main human fleet just as Steve's team was boarding the Krex vessel. 800 human ships faced off against 2,000 Krex vessels in the space around the Zelthari homeworld. Captain Helen Thompson commanded the UES Thunderbolt as it led the attack on the Krex fleet. The human ships had been upgraded with Zelthari energy weapons, making them more powerful than ever before. But the Krex still had more ships and bigger guns. "All ships, attack formation 7, Helen ordered over the fleet communication system. "Hit them hard and fast. Do not give them time to organize." The human fleet spread out across space, using tactics that the Krex could not predict. Some ships attacked from above, others from below. Some ships pretended to retreat, then turned around and attacked again. The Krex, who were used to fighting enemies that moved in patterns, began making mistakes, but the battle was still not going well for the humans. The Krex command ship was coordinating their entire fleet perfectly. Every time the humans gained an advantage, the Krex would adapt and fight back harder. Inside the command ship, Steve Adams was running through corridors filled with smoke and sparks. His team had fought their way past dozens of Krex soldiers, but they were still far from the central computer core. Worse, he had lost contact with the other 2 teams. "Colonel, we need to move faster," said Marine Tom Rodriguez. "I can hear more Krex soldiers coming from behind us." Steve looked at his map of the ship. They were close to the computer core, but they had to get through 3 more levels of defenses. He made a decision that he knew was dangerous. Rodriguez, take the disruption device, Steve ordered. I am going to hold off the Krek soldiers while you and the others get to the core. Sir, we are not leaving you behind, Rodriguez replied. Steve grabbed Rodriguez by the shoulders. That is an order, Marine. Get that device to the computer core. Nothing else matters. Rodriguez took the device and continued toward the core with the other two Marines. Steve turned around and prepared to face the Krek soldiers who were chasing them. He had enough ammunition for maybe 5 minutes of fighting. It would have to be enough. As Steve fought his last battle, Rodriguez and his team reached the central computer core. The room was huge, filled with strange machines that hummed with energy. In the center was a massive computer that controlled the entire Krek's fleet. How do we connect this thing? Asked Marine Lisa Carter, looking at the human device and the alien computer. Rodriguez studied the instructions that Dr. Kim had given them. He found the right cables and began connecting the disruption device to the Krek's computer. As soon as the connection was made, the device began working. Throughout the Krek's fleet, ships suddenly stopped responding to orders. The central computer that controlled all their movements was being scrambled by the human device. Krek ships that had been attacking human vessels suddenly turned and began firing at other Krek ships. Admiral Brooks saw the change immediately. All ships, the Kreks are confused, he announced. Attack now while they cannot coordinate. The human fleet pressed their advantage. Captain Helen Thompson led a direct assault on the largest Krek ships while they were unable to defend themselves properly. Captain Amy Johnson used her destroyer to target Krek supply ships, cutting off fuel and ammunition from the main fleet, but the Kreks were not finished. Their command ship began charging a massive weapon that could destroy entire planets. If they could not win the battle, they would destroy the Zelthari homeworld and everyone on it. Commander Julia Watson, who was leading a squadron of human fighters, saw the weapon charging. She realized that someone had to stop it before it could fire. All fighters, follow me, Julia ordered. We are going to stop that weapon. Julia knew it was a suicide mission. The weapon was protected by heavy shields and defensive guns. But if she could damage it enough, maybe it would not be able to destroy the planet. Julia's squadron of 12 fighters dove toward the massive Krek's weapon. Enemy fire filled the space around them, destroying one fighter after another. But Julia kept flying forward, focused only on her target. This is for Earth, Julia said as she crashed her fighter directly into the planet killer weapon. The explosion was visible across the entire battle zone. The weapon was destroyed, but the explosion also destroyed the Krek's command ship. Rodriguez and his team, who had completed their mission, died in the blast along with Colonel Adams and thousands of Krek soldiers. With their command ship gone and their communication system destroyed, the Krek's fleet fell apart. Ships that had been working together perfectly suddenly had no coordination. Some ships fled toward deep space. Others continued fighting, but without any plan. The human and Zelthari fleets pressed their attack. Captain Helen Thompson led the final assault on the remaining Krek ships. The battle lasted for 6 more hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. When the last Krek ship was destroyed, the space around the Zelthari homeworld was filled with debris and the wreckage of war, but the planet below was safe. The Zelthari people had survived. Admiral Brooks received a transmission from Ambassador Veltar. The alien leader appeared on the screen, and for the first time in weeks, he looked hopeful. Admiral Brooks, how can we ever thank you? Veltar said. We asked for help, and you gave us everything. You saved our entire civilization. Brooks thought about Colonel Adams, Commander Watson, and all the other humans who had died in the battle. Ambassador, we did what humans do. When our friends are in trouble, we help them. No matter what it costs. Veltar was quiet for a moment. Admiral, we have learned something important about humanity today. You do not just fight to win. You fight to make sure evil cannot hurt anyone else. 3 months later, Ambassador Veltar stood before the United Nations on Earth. He had come to thank humanity officially and to sign a permanent alliance between the Zelthari and human governments. The galaxy will remember what happened at our homeworld, Veltar told the assembled leaders. When peaceful people cried out for help, humanity did not send a small rescue mission. You came with the fury of 1,000 suns. You made sure that the Kreks could never hurt anyone again. President Collins stood up to respond. Ambassador, the Zeltheri have been our friends for 20 years. Friends protect each other. That is what makes us human. In the months that followed, human and Zelthari scientists worked together to explore the galaxy and help other species that had been hurt by the Kreks. They found planets where survivors were hiding and helped them rebuild their civilizations. The war against the Kreks became a legend throughout the galaxy. Other alien species learned that when humanity made friends, they would protect those friends with everything they had. The message was clear: hurt humanity's friends and face the consequences, but for the humans who fought in the war, it was simpler than that. They had heard a cry for help from people they cared about. They answered that cry with everything they had. It was the most human thing they could do.